Welcome to the Audio Description Network Alliance. We're so happy to have another Know Your Narrator episode with Melissa Exelberth. Thanks so much for joining us, Melissa. She is a voiceover performer, a voiceover talent, a voiceover actor, and an audio description narrator. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. I'm thrilled to be here.
I can hear it. Yes, let's get into it. What do you love about audio description?
I've been narrating and doing voiceover work for 25, 30 years. Every job is different. Every type of narration is different. What I found though, from the moment I started doing audio description is it's like the narrative part of an audiobook, the whole less is more kind of thing. I find I don't actually do anything. It's just I'm in the scene and it just draws me in. The sound design draws me in. Everything about the show or the film just draws me in and I just kind of go with the flow. It's almost like when I'm finished, I'm coming out of a daze in a way. I don't know if I'm explaining this right. But
It sounds like you're in the flow.
yeah, it just immediately and from the first job I did, it just drew me in that way. The closest thing I can liken it to is the narrative part of an audiobook.
Let's go back to what you said about the lesson more when you're not doing anything. I can only imagine that that's coming from the 25 years, 30 years of experience that you've had in voiceover. I'm hearing you say that you go with the flow and you're in the moment as well as doing less is more. Can you help explain to someone who might not be a performer or an actor what you are bringing that is less? Like what is that less? Could you define that?
I don't know if I really can. I do a lot of corporate movies, for instance, and it's kind of this is who we are, this is what we do type of thing in the corporate realm. So you're not over projecting or doing anything like that, but you are telling the story of the corporation in affirmative way. I don't know if I'm describing this correctly. I also narrate documentaries, and that's different because you're linking different parts of the story. You're not drawing attention to yourself, but you are providing a linkage between different parts of a story. With description, I find it's even less than that as far as not drawing attention to yourself. It's if I'm watching something with description, and I have to tell you, since I started doing this, everything I watch, I have the track on. I love it. If I'm noticing the narrator, then the narrator isn't doing a good job. With the best narration, I can't even tell you who narrated it or what their style was or anything about it. All I know is I've captured all of this information that I otherwise wouldn't have captured.
What I'm hearing is that as both a performer of audio description narration as well as an audience watching a show with audio description, that there is this immersive experience that happens, whether you're in the flow performing or whether you're immersed in the story as an audience. I'm curious if you could give some examples maybe to when a narrator in audio description stands out. For example, maybe they're too flat, or maybe they're conversational during a scene that's highly emotional that does need a just that little nudge. How would a narrator stand out in a way that would take you out of the story as an audience member?
Well, in a couple of instances, I've been taken out when something is too flat. It almost seems like a deliberate attempt to not show any connection with the film. Too loud is another thing. Too pointed. So, in other words, making a point, like actually pointing out specific things in a way that is like, oh, did you see that? It's hard to describe. They're just all of these things that take me out, basically make me feel a lack of connection with the material, that it's something on top of it rather than being an integral part of it.
And by defining what it isn't, you helped define what it is in a really clear way. I haven't heard it explained that way before, that lack of connection when it's sitting on top, that takes you out, and taking out is a bad thing in this context. You said if it's too loud, if it's too pointed. I was laughing at that. I had to put myself on mute because the cackle was loud on my side. So, when you, think about your experience in the flow back to being a audio description narrator when you're recording a script, can you give a example of maybe a challenge that you had within that script that you're really happy that you overcame? For example, something that took you out of the flow or maybe an assumption you made that you corrected yourself?
I do find that I'm very much guided by the sound design, by the scene itself, much more so than even the visuals in a way. That kind of draws me in and guides my read. That also is the same for me when I do some corporate videos and other things. If they provide me the sound design beforehand, I know how it's supposed to be read. With description, though, it's kind of like it makes the words come out of my mouth the way that fits the sound design. I can't describe it. On occasions where there's been silence, I've had to really focus on what the scene itself is. That's when I'll really pay attention to what's going on visually on the screen. You know what it is? It's just that audio draws us in so much more than visuals. Audio is emotional, and audio really connects us more than simply visuals do. At least in my case, it does. So that's more of a challenge, just scenes that have no sound design whatsoever, where everything is quiet, when I have to really focus and pay attention in what's going on the screen to give me an idea of the emotion of that scene.
Oh, that's great. And if we could go a little bit further into the guide, you said that the sound design guides your performance. I'm assuming the words guide too. For example, the scripts that you have, whether it is in corporate movies or in audio description scripts, do the words make a difference similarly to the sound design?
They do. They make a big difference, but, words can be interpreted so many different ways out of context. You don't know what the context is, but words by themselves don't really tell you. Now, on a script, the way the words are written may, the pacing of the words, ellipses, line breaks, those can all give you an indication of how something is supposed to be read. But yeah, so the words do matter. But more than that, it's the sound design and it's the emotion of the scene. When there is no sound design, there is no I mean, the dialogue is great because, the actors are bringing the emotion to the scene. So you hear that, and that informs you as to how something should be read. But it's everything together. I don't even know if that made sense.
What I'm hearing is that
Sorry.
this is great. I'm this is like
I never
deliciousness.
articulated this before. Nobody's ever asked me this before. So
It's not a familiar conversation either, and I think what's so great about your history as a voiceover talent is that it's bringing all these little secrets that you've used to be able to be hired regularly, that there's a reason that you're picked, and I think that these things that you're exploring with words have just become so innate that they're a part of you now. And so it's like asking a fish, what does water look like? You're in it. And I'm thinking about the guides that you gave. If I'm hearing you correctly, you say that in the audio description, if you have the sound design, the music, the audio cues, if you hear the dialogue of the characters, when you're reading the script, it's beyond just the words, it's the structure of the words, how the words are put together, the paragraph breaks, the ellipses, you said, the dashes, the maybe even parentheses if the script is written that way, that all of these things give you the ability to flow. But with that flow comes a very astute focus. I'd imagine that when you're reading a script, whether it's for a corporate movie or if it's for audio description or any of the other many things that you voice, that if something were to be happening close by you, that had you not been focused, you'd probably pay attention to it. But in this case, you'd probably be so focused that other things could be happening around you and you might not even notice. Is that a fair assumption?
um yeah, I think it is. I'm always conscious when I'm in the booth if I'm narrating a TV documentary or a corporate movie or something like that. But with audio description, it's almost like I forget I'm there. It's just like if you're at the doctor, say, and you have to have that instantaneous anesthesia for a procedure or something like that, and you're sitting there and you're chatting happily away, et cetera, and you're just talking to them, and the next thing you know, you wake up.
That's great.
But
Voiceover
it's
audio description narration is like anesthesia.
it's like anesthesia. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like you start and you go in and then, I mean, of course there's interruptions and of course, I mean, you mess up, you have to go back. But in the overall scheme of things, I can't tell you how much time goes by. I can't tell you what I'm doing.
Totally
That's
fair.
really what it comes down to.
Well, let's talk about the comparison between the work that you do in voiceover outside of audio description and audio description narration. Are there some similarities or differences that come to mind?
The closest I've come to again is the narrative part of an audiobook. There's documentary as well, but that's different. It depends on the show and it depends on the type of documentary and it depends on whether it's a show. If you're noticing the narrator, it's not a good thing, unless you're David Attenborough. I mean, that's
There's
that's a whole other
exceptions.
yeah, exactly. That's a whole other story. But it is more of you're driving people to the next thing. With audio description, I find you're just totally in the moment.
This is going great. Thank you.
I would like actually, I would like to see description all over the place.
Just about to ask you, where would you love to see it headed?
I have a big wish list as far as that. First of all, I'd like to see everything described. All the back catalogs, I'd like to have all of that described, not just for the entertainment purposes only, but if you think about it, it's like, okay, my family is 3 generations of I Love Lucy and the chocolate episode. Okay? That is such a cultural moment. When people are at work around the water cooler or whatever, or just in life, there are so many cultural references to everyday life. And when blind audiences can't access that, can't be part of that because they haven't seen it. I mean, how do you describe the I Love Lucy chocolate episode where they're just stuffing their mouths? I think it's a huge cultural thing where a huge group of people are left out of culture, cultural moments, things that connect people. It's all communication and it's connection. So, yeah, I'd like to see every single back catalog described for everybody. I'd also like to see sighted audiences embrace description. I just didn't start turning the description on when I started doing this work or even became interested in. I've been interested in this for 10 years, more than 10 years. And in fact, got in touch with somebody about 10 years ago, but there was nothing happening in New York and it was all in studio. So it wasn't until fairly recently that I was able to connect and actually do this work. But since I have the description on all the time, not only because it enables me to do what I can cook while I'm watching TV, but also because I pick things up that I otherwise wouldn't have noticed. Sometimes how you see a show or you see a movie multiple times, and every time you see it, you get something different. I find that description fills in a lot of that. I'd really like to see description become part of the pre-production and production process on every movie, on every show, on every piece of video out there, even corporate videos. I'd like to see writers incorporated into their scripts, producers budget and schedule for it. I want to see directors direct with the description as tangible a part of a production as all of the other elements. I want to see it become part of the actual creative process, part of the actual film or show, because I think it would enhance everything. It would make films and shows more creative, I think, and it's not just a matter of bringing a community in to what everybody else already has access to, but I think it would enhance the material enormously for both blind audiences and sighted audiences.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I mean, if you could bring the AD companies into the process earlier, if you could budget for the description as part of the actual production budget, just like everything else is budgeted for, then I think the AD companies and producers would have the resources to create a really superb product.
I really feel privileged to be able to do it, to have found this community and to be able to access this work. I just love it. Alongside my VO work, I volunteer narrated for blind audiences for about 20 years. There was a place in New York that I used to do a lot of that for. And I just love the fact that I can continue serving these audiences and be working. I love it.
How can people follow you? Social media, websites?
Yeah, websites, melissaexelberth.com or melissax.com because most people's brains freeze at my last name. I also have another site that's a little more detailed, which is femalevoiceovertalent.org. Everywhere else is I'm Melissa X, EX.
Thanks so much for joining us, Melissa.
Well, thank you for having me, Roy. I feel really privileged. Thank you.